December 18th, 1952, Harlem. The snow fell heavy that morning, covering 142nd Street in white silence. 5 women stood on the sidewalk holding cardboard boxes, their children shivering beside them. Behind them, their apartment building, the only home they'd known since their husbands died in Korea, was being boarded up. A man in an expensive coat watched from a black Cadillac, smoking a cigar, making sure they understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. Vito Genovese owned this building now, and war widows didn't pay enough rent to matter. What Genovese didn't know was that one of those women, Margaret Chen, worked part-time cleaning offices in the building where Bumpy Johnson conducted business. And what Genovese definitely didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson's father had died in World War I, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone in a country that didn't care about black war widows. 7 days before Christmas, Vito Genovese made the worst business decision of his life. He evicted 5 war widows into the snow, and Bumpy Johnson decided to teach the Italian mob something they'd never forget. Respect isn't about power. It's about principle. The eviction happened at 9:00 a.m. Margaret Chen, 34 years old, widow of Sergeant David Chen, killed at Chosin Reservoir. 2 children, ages 6 and 8. Rosa Martinez, 29, widow of Corporal Luis Martinez, killed at Heartbreak Ridge. 3 children, ages 4, 7, and 9. Dorothy Williams, 31, widow of Private James Williams, killed at Porkchop Hill. 1 child, age 5. Sarah O'Connor, 28, widow of Lieutenant Patrick O'Connor, killed in action near the 38th parallel, pregnant, 7 months. Elizabeth Hayes, 36, widow of Staff Sergeant Robert Hayes, killed during the Incheon landing. 4 children, ages 3, 5, 8, and 10. 15 children total. All of them standing in the snow on December 18th because Vito Genovese wanted to convert their building into a high-end apartment complex for wealthy white tenants. The building at 412 West 142nd Street had been designated affordable housing for military families since 1946. The widows paid $45 a month, subsidized by a Veterans Assistance Program, but Genovese had bought the building through a shell company 3 months earlier for $87,000. He'd done the math. 15 luxury apartments at $200 a month meant $3,000 monthly income instead of $675. The widows were bad business, so he gave them 30 days' notice. When they couldn't find new housing in time, he sent his men to physically remove them. Margaret Chen had been cleaning Bumpy's office building for 2 years. She was quiet, efficient, invisible in the way working women often are. Bumpy had spoken to her exactly 3 times, brief, polite exchanges. He knew she was a widow, knew she had children, knew she worked 2 jobs to survive. On December 18th at 6:00 p.m., Margaret was cleaning the hallway outside Bumpy's office when she collapsed. Just sat down against the wall and started crying, silent tears running down her face. Bumpy's associate, Illinois Gordon, found her. He called Bumpy out. Bumpy knelt down beside her. "Margaret, what happened?" She couldn't speak at first, just handed him an eviction notice, final, dated that morning. "They put us out," she finally whispered. "Me and 4 other women. All of us. Our husbands died in Korea. They put our children in the snow." "Who?" Margaret looked up. "Vito Genovese. His men came this morning, took our keys, boarded up the doors. We have nowhere to go. Mr. Johnson, it's Christmas in 7 days." Bumpy helped her stand, walked her into his office, sat her down. Illinois brought water. Bumpy read the eviction notice carefully. Then he asked questions. How long had she lived there? 6 years. How much was rent? $45 a month? Were the other widows also military? Yes, all of them. Korea. Their husbands died for this country, and now Genovese throws them into the street a week before Christmas. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his wallet, handed Margaret $500. "Find a hotel for you and the other women, all 5 families. Stay there until after Christmas." Margaret stared at the money. "Mr. Johnson, I can't. You can, and you will, because in 1 week you're going back to that building, all 5 of you." Bumpy's voice was calm, certain. "And when you go back, you'll own it. Not rent it. Own it. I don't understand." "You will. Now go take care of your children." After Margaret left, Bumpy sat alone in his office. Illinois came back in. "Boss, you know who Genovese is, right?" "I know exactly who he is. He's the man who thinks he can evict war widows a week before Christmas and face no consequences." Illinois was quiet. Then, What's the play? Bumpy stood up, put on his coat. First, we verify everything. I want to know every detail about that building, about those women, about Genovese's purchase. If Margaret is telling the truth, if those women are really war widows, if their husbands really died serving this country, then Vito Genovese just made an enemy he can't afford. And if she's lying, then we help her anyway because it's Christmas. But she's not lying. I can see it in her eyes. That's the look my mother had when my father died. That's the look of a woman who did everything right and still got destroyed by a system that doesn't care. Bumpy spent the next 2 days investigating. He sent men to verify every detail of Margaret's story. They came back with files, photographs, documentation. Everything she'd said was true. All 5 women were legitimate war widows. All 5 husbands had died in Korea between 1950 and 1951. All 5 families had been living in that building under a Veterans Housing Assistance Program, and Vito Genovese had bought the building specifically to evict them and convert it to luxury housing. The purchase was legal. The eviction was legal. Everything Genovese had done was technically within the law. But legal and right are not the same thing. On December 20th, Bumpy made a phone call to Vito Genovese's office in Little Italy. "This is Bumpy Johnson. I need a meeting with Mr. Genovese." The man on the other end laughed. "Mr. Genovese doesn't take meetings with—" He paused. "Your kind of people. Tell him it's about the building on 142nd Street. Tell him he has 24 hours to meet with me or things get complicated." The line went dead. Bumpy wasn't surprised. Genovese was one of the most powerful mob bosses in New York. He controlled gambling, loan sharking, labor unions, politicians. He'd ordered dozens of murders, survived multiple assassination attempts, built an empire on fear and violence. He wasn't going to be intimidated by a Harlem gangster calling about some evicted widows. But Bumpy wasn't trying to intimidate. He was giving Genovese a chance to fix this quietly. When Genovese didn't call back within 24 hours, Bumpy moved to Plan B. December 21st, 10 p.m. Vito Genovese lived in a mansion in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. 15 rooms, ocean view, surrounded by walls and security. He felt untouchable there, insulated from the violence of his business. That night, Genovese was hosting a Christmas party. 50 guests, politicians, judges, business owners, all of them on his payroll in one way or another. At 10:17 p.m., the power went out. The entire mansion went dark. Genovese's security team immediately went on alert, hands on weapons, moving to protect their boss. Then the front door opened. Nobody had unlocked it. Nobody had broken it. It just opened. And Bumpy Johnson walked in, alone, hands in his pockets, calm as if he'd been invited. Genovese's head of security, a man named Sal Marchetti, pulled his gun. "Don't move." Bumpy stopped, smiled. "I'm here to talk to Mr. Genovese, not to fight. You got 10 seconds to turn around and leave before I put a bullet in your head." Bumpy looked past Sal, directly at Genovese, who was standing in the center of the room surrounded by guests. "Mr. Genovese, I called yesterday. You didn't call back, so I came in person. We need to discuss 412 West 142nd Street. Genovese stared at Bumpy for a long moment. Then he started laughing. "You broke into my home on Christmas week to talk about a building in Harlem?" Bumpy nodded. "A building you stole from 5 war widows." Genovese's smile faded. "I didn't steal anything. I bought it legally. Evicted tenants legally. Everything I did was legal. Legal and right aren't the same thing." Genovese's voice turned cold. "Get him out of here." 3 men moved toward Bumpy. He didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon, just spoke quietly. "Before your men do something stupid, you should know that right now, 15 of my people are positioned around this property. They're not here to attack. They're here to make sure I walk out safely. If I don't, this mansion burns to the ground with everyone inside. You're bluffing." "Am I?" Bumpy pulled out a small radio, pressed the button. "Illinois. You there? Illinois." Gordon's voice came through clearly. "Right here, boss. How many gallons did we bring?" 40 gallons of gasoline, boss. Positioned at all 4 corners of the property." Bumpy looked at Genovese. "I didn't come here to threaten you. I came here to offer you a deal. But if you'd rather test whether I'm bluffing, we can do that too." The room was silent. Genovese's guests were frozen, terrified. Genovese himself was calculating, weighing options. Finally, he spoke. "Everyone out. Leave us." The guests fled quickly. Genovese's security team hesitated. "Boss, we can't. Out. Now." They left reluctantly. When the room was empty except for Bumpy and Genovese, the mob boss sat down in a leather chair, lit a cigar. "You've got 5 minutes. Talk." Bumpy sat across from him. 412 West 142nd Street. You evicted 5 war widows and their 15 children 1 week before Christmas. Their husbands died in Korea, died serving this country, and you threw their families into the snow because they didn't pay enough rent. Genovese shrugged. "Business is business. This isn't business. This is cruelty, and it ends tonight." Genovese leaned forward. "You think you can walk into my home and tell me what to do? You think because you run Harlem you can dictate terms to me? I run half of New York. I have judges, cops, politicians in my pocket. What do you have?" Bumpy's voice was calm. "I have principle, and I have the respect of every person in Harlem. You have power, Mr. Genovese. But power without respect is just tyranny, and tyranny always falls." Genovese laughed. "Philosophy. You broke into my mansion to give me philosophy." "No. I broke into your mansion to give you a choice. Here's the deal. You transfer ownership of 412 West 142nd Street to those 5 widows. Full ownership. Free and clear. They own the building. They live there rent-free for the rest of their lives. And when they die, their children inherit it." Genovese stared at Bumpy like he'd lost his mind. "You want me to give away an $87,000 building? I want you to do the right thing. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning every newspaper in New York gets a story. Vito Genovese, war profiteer, evicts war widows at Christmas. I have photographs of those women and children standing in the snow. I have copies of their husbands' death certificates. I have documentation of your purchase and eviction. And I have reporters who owe me favors. By noon tomorrow, you'll be the most hated man in New York." Genovese's jaw tightened. "You think I care about newspapers? I think you care about your business. And when the public turns against you, your political friends will turn too. Judges, cops, politicians. They all need public support. They can't be seen protecting a man who throws war widows into the street at Christmas. You'll lose your protection. And without protection, your empire crumbles." Genovese was silent for a long moment. Then, "Even if I wanted to do this, which I don't, why would I? What do you offer in return?" Bumpy leaned back. "I offer you something more valuable than that building. I offer you respect in Harlem. Right now you're expanding your operations north. Gambling, numbers, loan sharking. You're stepping into my territory. I could fight you, make it bloody, expensive, public, or we could have an understanding. You do right by these widows, and I don't interfere with your expansion. We coexist. You stay out of housing and community welfare. I stay out of your gambling operations. We both make money. Nobody dies." Genovese considered this. "And if I refuse your deal, then we go to war. And I promise you, Mr. Genovese, it will cost you more than $87,000. It will cost you blood, money, and reputation. All over 5 widows you should have never touched in the first place." The silence stretched. Finally, Genovese stood up, walked to a window. "You really broke into my home, threatened to burn it down, all for 5 women you don't even know?" Bumpy stood as well. "My father died in World War I, left my mother with 3 children and nothing. I watched her struggle every day of my childhood because this country didn't care about war widows, especially black war widows. So yes, I broke into your home for 5 women I barely know. Because someone should have broken into someone's home for my mother, and nobody did." Genovese turned around. "You're a sentimental fool." "Maybe. But I'm a fool who's standing in your mansion with gasoline surrounding your property. So the question isn't whether I'm a fool. The question is whether you're smart enough to take the deal." Genovese walked to his desk, pulled out a bottle of whiskey, poured 2 glasses. He handed one to Bumpy. "You've got balls, Johnson. I'll give you that." "Is that a yes?" Genovese drank his whiskey in one swallow. "It's a yes. I'll transfer the building to the widows. But not because you threatened me, because you're right. This war is too expensive over something that doesn't matter to me. The building was a side investment, not worth dying over." Bumpy drank his whiskey. "Smart choice." Genovese pointed a finger at him. "But if you ever break into my home again, deal or no deal, I'll kill you myself." "Understood." Bumpy set down his glass. "I'll need the transfer documents by December 24th, Christmas Eve, so those women can spend Christmas in their homes. You'll have them, Now get out of my house." Bumpy walked to the door, then paused. "One more thing." "What now?" "Merry Christmas, Mr. Genovese, and thank you for doing the right thing." Genovese didn't respond, just watched as Bumpy walked out into the night. The power came back on 30 seconds later. Genovese's security team rushed back in. "Boss, are you okay? Should we go after him?" Genovese poured another whiskey. "No, let him go. But boss, he threatened you. He broke in. He won. And sometimes in this business, you have to know when you've lost. That man was willing to die tonight for 5 women he doesn't know. You can't fight that kind of crazy. You can only respect it." December 24th, Christmas Eve. Margaret Chen received a phone call at 8 a.m. "This is Robert Morrison, attorney for Mr. Vito Genovese. I have documents that require your signature." "What kind of documents?" "Ownership transfer documents for 412 West 122nd Street. Mr. Genovese is transferring full ownership of the property to you and the 4 other widows who were evicted. You'll own the building jointly. No rent, no mortgage. It's yours." Margaret thought she was dreaming. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. Just come to my office at noon with the other 4 women. Bring identification. We'll finalize everything." At noon, all 5 widows sat in a lawyer's office in downtown Manhattan, staring at documents they couldn't believe were real. The lawyer explained everything. The building was theirs. They could live there rent-free forever. They could pass it to their children. They could even rent out units and keep the income. It was theirs, completely. Rosa Martinez spoke first, her voice shaking. "Why? Why would Mr. Genovese do this?" The lawyer hesitated. "Then, let's just say Mr. Genovese had a change of heart. It's Christmas. Consider it a gift." The women signed the documents, still in shock. As they left the office, Margaret saw a familiar car parked across the street. Bumpy Johnson's car. He was leaning against it, watching. She walked over. "Mr. Johnson, did you do this?" Bumpy smiled. "I just had a conversation with Mr. Genovese, reminded him that war widows deserve respect. The rest was his decision." Margaret started crying. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You didn't just give us a home, you gave us hope." Bumpy handed her an envelope. Inside was $2,000 in cash. "For Christmas. For your children. For all 5 families. Buy presents. Buy food. Have a real Christmas." Margaret couldn't speak, just hugged him. Bumpy patted her shoulder gently. "Your husband died for this country. The least this country can do is make sure his family has a home. Merry Christmas, Margaret." That night, December 24th, 1952, 5 war widows and their 15 children moved back into 412 West 142nd Street. They decorated a Christmas tree in the lobby, cooked dinner together, sang carols. For the first time since their husbands died, they felt safe, felt like they had a future. And in Harlem, the story spread like wildfire. Bumpy Johnson had broken into Vito Genovese's mansion and forced the mob boss to give 5 war widows their home back. The story grew with each telling, became legend, and the message was clear. In Harlem, you don't mess with widows. You don't mess with children. You don't mess with people who've already sacrificed everything, because Bumpy Johnson is watching, and he doesn't care how powerful you are. Years later, in 1968, a reporter asked Bumpy about the incident. "Mr. Johnson, is it true you broke into Vito Genovese's home and threatened to burn it down over some evicted widows?" Bumpy was 66 years old then, still sharp, still dangerous. "I didn't threaten anything. I had a conversation with 40 gallons of gasoline surrounding his property?" The reporter smiled. Bumpy smiled back. "Sometimes conversations require visual aids, but yes, it's true. I went to Genovese's home. And yes, those widows got their building back. Was it worth the risk? Going up against one of the most powerful mob bosses in America?" The reporter pressed. Bumpy's smile faded. His voice became serious. "My father died in World War I. My mother raised 3 children alone in poverty because this country didn't care about war widows. I watched her suffer every single day. So when I saw 5 women and 15 children thrown into the snow 1 week before Christmas, I didn't see strangers. I saw my mother. I saw myself as a child. And I decided that if I had the power to fix it, I would. Even if it meant going to war with Vito Genovese. And did Genovese ever retaliate? No. Because Genovese was smart enough to understand something important. That building wasn't worth dying over. And more than that, he understood that some fights you can't win. Not because you lack power, but because you're on the wrong side of morality. You can't beat a man who's willing to die for widows and orphans. You can only step aside and let him win. Bumpy leaned back in his chair. Plus, we had an understanding after that. He stayed out of Harlem's community welfare. I stayed out of his gambling operations. We both made money. Nobody died. That's good business. The reporter wrote everything down, then asked one final question. What happened to those 5 widows? Bumpy smiled. They lived in that building for the rest of their lives. Raised their children there. Some of those children went to college, became teachers, doctors, business owners, and when the widows died, their children inherited the building. Last I heard, it's still in their families, still providing homes, still standing as proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. The reporter published the story in 1968. By then, Vito Genovese was in prison, his empire crumbling. Bumpy Johnson was still running Harlem, still protecting his community, still fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. And 412 West 142nd Street still stood, home to the families of 5 men who died in Korea, a monument to the night Bumpy Johnson broke into a mansion and reminded a mob boss that power without principle is nothing, that Christmas isn't about money or property, it's about doing right by people who've already lost everything. December 18, 1952. 5 widows were thrown into the snow. December 24, 1952. 5 widows owned their homes. 7 days, 1 conversation, 40 gallons of gasoline, and the understanding that some things are worth fighting for, even if it means walking into the lion's den. Bumpy Johnson taught Vito Genovese a lesson that night. Respect isn't taken, it's earned. And you earn it by standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves, even if it costs you everything, especially if it costs you everything. That's the difference between a gangster and a legend. A gangster takes what he wants. A legend gives what's needed. Bumpy Johnson was a legend. And those 5 widows, and their 15 children, and their children's children, will never forget it. Merry Christmas, Harlem. Merry Christmas to the widows who got their homes back. And Merry Christmas to the man who made it happen. Rest in power, Bumpy Johnson, the king of Harlem, the protector of widows, the man who broke into a mansion and came out with deeds instead of blood. If this story made you believe in justice, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Was Bumpy right to threaten Genovese? When the law won't protect war widows, what options are left? Turn on notifications. We're bringing you the untold stories of Bumpy Johnson. The moments when one man stood between the powerful and the powerless, and won.